10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast, episode 337. Hey everybody, welcome back to episode 337 of the 10-Minute Jazz Lesson Podcast. Welcome back in, so happy to have you here. And it is the fourth week of the month, so you know what that means. It's time for our tune of the month. And since we've been studying the great Lester Young all month, we are going to choose a tune with one of his most famous solos over it, and that is On the Sunny Side of the Street, one of my favorite jazz standards. We're going to talk about the form, talk about the chords, and then I have prepared an etude for you over it, trying to kind of channel Lester Young a little bit. But before we get into the show, as usual, just wanted to remind you this is a listener-supported podcast. And we do rely on listeners just like you to keep the show coming out each and every week in high quality. What we do is we ask you for a small monthly donation. We do that through the Patreon platform. And in return for that donation, you do get a PDF with every single episode along with audio examples and other extras. So you will be getting the etude this week in concert, B-flat, E-flat, and bass clef. So a lot of stuff going on over on the Patreon platform, a lot of educational materials over there. So if you do enjoy the show and you want some extra materials to go along with it, please go to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, click on one of the Patreon banners, and you can get yourself signed up today for instant access to every single episode that we have ever done. All right. So let's dive into the episode. So as I mentioned, we are going to be doing the tune On the Sunny Side of the Street. If you've never heard Lester play over this, you have got to check it out. So I've been trying to write this etude in the style of Lester and some of the things that we talked about this month. And one of those things was that Lester would often always opt for the simpler option when it came to like playing over a cadence, playing over a 2-5-1, playing over a 3-6-2-5-1. So that's the biggest thing that I want you to watch out for. You know, where are the places that you might reach for a super bebop line and outline the changes exactly and use a bunch of chromaticism, whereas Lester might not have. He may have just gone with the pentatonic scale over the root, or he might play something really, really bluesy where Charlie Parker would play something, you know, weaving his way in and out of the changes. This is a good opportunity to really examine the difference between the approach of both of those musicians. And in an ideal world, we would have a really, really healthy mix of both. You know, that's something I try to do in my own playing, is have some flexibility where if I want to reach for those really, really angular sounds and really get into those chord changes, play a lot of tension and release, play a lot of chromaticism, chord substitutions, things that the great bebop musicians have taught me, I want to be able to do that. I love that sound. But I also want to have the flexibility that if I'm in a different situation, or if I'm playing at a different tempo, or if the tune calls for it, the setting calls for it, the gig calls for it, I want to be able to play something that's a lot simpler, but just as convincing. And I think that's one of the things that Lester has really taught me to be able to do and made me examine that part of my playing. So largely that's what the etude is based on. Now, before we hear the etude, let's actually jump into the form of Sunny Side of the Street. Okay, so first things first, this is an AABA form, 32 bars, always nice when it works out that way, and it is in the key of concert C. So let's dive into the initial A section. So the first chord that we see is C6, which is just our one chord. And then we see it moving up to the third. So we're on a 3-7 chord. Then we see it go up to a major 7 on the 4. Then we see it go up to a 5 very briefly. And then we use a diminished passing chord to get up to the 6 chord. Then this 6 chord actually becomes the 2 chord of a 2-5-1 in the key of G major, but we don't go there. So it appears that we're going 2, 5 in the key of G, but then that 5 chord in the key of G turns minor and becomes the 2 of the key of C, and then we see a 2, 5. And then here's the thing that happens in the first ending that's a little bit tricky, but really, really cool. We have a 3, 6, 2, 5, 1 all in the same measure, so 1 chord per beat. And then we get back to that 1 chord at the beginning of the second A section. So let's hear that entire A section. 3, 4, 5, passing diminished, 6, deceptive cadence, 2, 5, 3, 6, 2, 5, 1. And then we're into our second A section. Now, the only thing that happens differently in the second section is that instead of doing that turnaround at the end to get back to our C chord, we just do a regular 2, 5, 1. And that's in bars 15 and 16. All right, so now we have to talk about the bridge. The bridge is really, really cool on this tune. So we see it doing a really, really typical thing that happens in a bunch of songs. We see a 2, 5 to 4. So we're modulating to that 4. Now we see a very similar thing that happened in the A section. So we have this deceptive cadence, A minor to D7, which makes you think it's going to go to G. But instead, that D7 becomes minor. And now we are doing a 2, 5 back in C to get our way back to the last A section. So 2, 5, and then we are back to our C chord to finish out the tune. So the bridge. That's it. It's as simple as that. It's actually a pretty simple tune. If you can kind of remember the first 4 bars, it's not that difficult beyond the first 4 bars. You've got to remember that initial movement from the 1 up to that dominant 3, which is actually a pretty common thing in a lot of tunes. So that would be a good thing to be able to hear and to comprehend both orally and root movement wise. But beyond that, it's really not that bad. All the chord movement makes a ton of sense in this tune. All right, so now let's check out the chorus that I have prepared for you in the form of the etude. So remember, listen for some of those things that we talked about in Lester's playing, right? Like playing over the 2-5 just in the key of the 1, but trying to do it in a way that it still has gravity and it still has some sense of tension and release, even though these are not insane bebop lines. So here's the etude. All right, so there you have it. A lot simpler than my etudes usually are, but I had a lot of fun writing this one and kind of thinking about one of my favorite saxophone players in Lester Young. So let me know if you have any questions on this. I hope you enjoy the Etude. Remember, you can grab that on our Patreon site by going to our website, 10minutejazzlesson.com, clicking on one of the Patreon banners. Thank you to everybody that is supporting the show. We've got over 350 members over there, and you guys are truly the ones that keep this podcast going. So I really, really appreciate it. All right, we will see you next week with another episode. We'll talk to you soon, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.